Hi, I'm Clarissa Mall, producer and moderator of the Bulletin. Here's a short clip from one of our segments in this week's episode. To hear the whole conversation, visit the link in our show notes or search for The Bulletin on your favorite podcast platform. This week, a New York Times Siena College poll confirmed that Black and Hispanic voters are drifting from their traditional fidelities to the Democrats to support Donald Trump in this election instead. While Democrats retain the majority of Black support, 78% to a 15% supporting Trump, that margin has shrunk almost 20 percentage points over the last 8 years. Now, in the shadow of these numbers, presidential candidate Kamala Harris sat down with radio host Charlemagne the God for a conversation she hopes will boost her goodwill among Black voters, and this week announced new plans to support Black men through a series of new initiatives. Joining us to talk more about this is CT's own Sho Baraka, editorial director of our Big Tent initiative. Sho, welcome to the Bulletin.
Thank you for having me, Clarissa. I'm excited.
Sho, I want to begin by acknowledging that the Black vote isn't a monolith. There is a lot of nuance geographically, generationally, ethnically, religiously. But when it comes to political candidates, who are they talking about when they say the Black vote? And do you think that they're accurate?
I remember when the first George Bush was running for president, my uncle voted for him, and my whole family just was bawling and crying and just like, how could you vote for this Republican? And the only thing I knew was like, well, what's happening? And it was basically, well, Black people don't like Republicans, I guess. And so that was kind of like the indelible idea that stuck into my head for most of my life. And so I do think, yes, there is historically a Black vote, but I do think rightfully it's changing because Malcolm X famously talked about the ballot and the bullet and how Democrats have used the Black vote for decades. And I do think part of the tension is a pushback on that for some people who are just ideologically pushing back, and then there's some real interest that they feel like they see from Donald Trump. So
Steve Krakauer over at The Hill reported that Black voters say they find Trump less offensive than ever before, more fun, and most associated with the issues that they care about. So when you think about those issues that they care about, what do you feel like Republicans have to offer Black voters right now?
I think, and I don't know if it's, actual policies that I will say that people, well, we can talk about, I guess, actual policies, but I do think there is a narrative around family that people seeing within the Black community, especially some of these men, are finding appealing. Not to say that Democrats are necessarily bailing on family, but there have been some sentiments that have been attached to Democratic vote or Democratic policies that doesn't seem to push, I guess, family forward, whether that be its association to Black Lives Matter that intentionally removed kind of like the male figure from some of its tenets, whether how you feel about abortion, some of the social issues around trans and LGBTQA or IA rights and whatnot, and even some of the sentiment that people had during Obama's presidency where they would say the narrative within certain barbershops would be, well, Obama did more for the LGBTQ community than he did for Black, community. And so I think that's the narrative around what socially is being done. Policy wise, I think you have these, and it's interesting, we'll talk about Kamala's, some of her policies that are going to try to appeal to Black men. I think some folks tend to think that the conservatives are better when it comes to helping individuals get out of poverty, because there's this idea, and especially I think it's a sense of pride. Men don't want to be given things, and if you continue to preach this idea that, and some people are believing it, like, hey, they're giving you handouts, and if you believe, like, no, I got to get it from the mud, as they say, on my own terms, then you're going to tend to believe that the Democratic Party is coddling you. And I think some of the rebuke even to what Obama has done in the last couple of days, and how some of the Democratic Party has spoken down, I guess you can say, not to say that the conservatives haven't, but I think that's part of the issue. Is like, see, they think that we're children and we don't have the agency and the audacity to be agents of our own liberation, if you will. And I think that may be appealing to a lot of men.
Yeah. So, Sho, what you're talking about is this last Thursday night, Barack Obama suggested at this gathering in Pittsburgh that Black men weren't feeling the idea of a woman being president. Uh, to some, it was like a gentle rebuke from your uncle. Others, it was a call out. Russell, do you think strategically right now this was a poor move on the Harris Waltz ticket now that the campaign is down to crunch time?
Well, I think we'll see. I don't think we really know what's going on right now because the polling is remarkably consistent when it comes to where the race is. Vice President Harris up anywhere from 2 to 5% the popular vote. But it is not consistent at all when it comes to the crosstabs. There's some polling data that does suggest this media narrative of a huge gender gap. There's others that do not show that when it comes to Black and Hispanic voters. So I just don't think we know. When it comes to Obama's message, I think it's part of a piece with everything else that the vice president is doing. So the Charlemagne the God interview, which paired along with the possibility of what we're at least hearing of a Joe Rogan interview. And I think watching both the Charlemagne interview and the Fox News interview, she does much better in that kind of a setting where it's not just a straight policy conversation. In the Charlemagne interview, it was a lively sort of back and forth, more informal kind of conversation. With the Fox News interview, it was combative, and I think that portrayed a tougher, more authentic version of her. So I think it's all part of what she's trying to do. The fact that she is reaching out to men voters this way could be because the internal polling is showing a real problem with men voters. It could also, though, be because of how well she is doing with women voters that she's now kind of banking that and going and going to persuade. I don't know.
Can I say, I think she's done a wonderful job, and in some ways strategically distancing herself from Obama's statements. And she's been consistently, in the last couple of weeks, reiterating the fact that she has to earn the Black male vote. Like, it's not something that should be given to her just on the simple fact that she herself identifies as a Black woman. And I think that is the kind of message that needs to be communicated to some of these individuals who may struggle for voting for her, or Democrats in general.
So, one of the really interesting things that I've noticed as I've read on this topic is this idea of like an apology or a conversion story when it comes to Black male voters either coming to the side of Donald Trump or moving toward Kamala Harris. For example, the comedian D.L. Hewley said at the DNC that he'd been wrong about Harris, but had come to believe she was the hope for America. Charlemagne the God gave a similar kind of conversion story. And we see the same thing on the right with men saying that they've been converted to see politics from Trump's position. Can you talk to me a little bit, Sho, Mike, about why this idea of a conversion narrative matters, particularly for men?
It was a couple years ago on Larry David's show Curb Your Enthusiasm, where Larry realized that by walking around wearing a MAGA hat, he would alienate everyone around him, which for Larry David was a win. Larry, he doesn't want to be around people. He doesn't want anyone to sit next to him at the sushi bar. He doesn't want anyone to talk to him in public. And around Hollywood, everyone was kind of horrified by the MAGA hat, and so it's almost like the inverse of that. Trying to communicate, hey, it's okay to be a Trump voter. It's okay to be a Republican in this season. I think that's what's kind of driving the Republican efforts.
I love the word. I love the word conversion, and I think a lot of us who came to faith in hostile environments understand how narratives drive identity. And when you begin to go against the social sensibilities or the essentialism of a particular people group, you have to convert. And you have to be very testimonial about your conversion. You have to be like, look, I know for years I've been told that I am supposed to hate Republicans and conservatives, but here's my conversion story, and here's why, whether I agree with them or not. Same thing with the D.L. Hugleys and, some of the people who may have been liberal in their political leanings, but knew Kamala to be a states cop, if you will, who imprisoned black men, right? Well, to find out that information is incorrect, they promoted this particular narrative. So you have to, in some ways, perform this act of repentance, a public profession saying, hey, this is where I got it wrong. And so now here's my public profession of this new particular faith in this individual. And I think because our politics is so polarizing, you find that people feel the need to have to make these declarations publicly to say, hey, I know I don't come off as the individual that should have this particular belief, but thus here's my testimony. And it's one, sad, but it's also two, I think, indicative of why, and I love the language conversion, because it's the idolatry we put into our politics and making it somewhat of a new religion, if you will. Or I wouldn't say new religion, but a religion, if you will.
Listen to the full episode wherever podcasts are found